back. It is Wednesday, and you know what that means, Mental Health Minute. And if it's not me, I always bring someone in to have a healthy conversation, because Mental Health Minute is all about taking care of you. You are the star player, and every Wednesday we want to provide you with this Mental Health Minute. And as I shared in the other episodes that I provided in this platform or in this space, Mental Health Minute came about when, as I worked with different groups, generations, diversity groups, it was all about, before I start giving them the training or whatever, I gave them a minute for themselves first. It was important for me as a facilitator for them to have that minute. So this platform is all about giving you some goodness, bringing some great resources, but at the same time, we want to give you that 1 minute, right? And this 1 minute is all about you, whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do. If you want to hold yourself for a whole minute, do that. If you want to think about the great things that you need to accomplish, do that. If you want to give yourself big ups 100 times within that minute, do that. This minute is for you. So after we take this minute and I give you this minute, I'm going to bring us back into this room, and I am bringing Dr. Joe Johnson with me to this room to tackle a topic, and that topic is finding a therapist. Yeah, you heard it right. We're going to help you in a discussion here and hopefully influence and inspire you, if you do need help, in that form of a way that you seek it. So in that sense, this minute is for you. We're going to take this minute, and after this minute, we're going to come back with this goodness. So please enjoy this minute. Peace. Thank you for taking that minute with us. Thank you for giving that minute to yourself. That minute is important, whether you can take it throughout the week, take it on the weekend. Make sure you give yourself that minute. It's not hard to do, right? And a big part of this topic of Mental Health Minute and just mental health in general, it's important for me to bring amazing individuals who offer amazing services, but also who are amazing resources. Mental Health Minute, beyond giving you this minute and this resource, it's all about bringing a topic to the table. And today we have a great topic, but beyond that, I have an amazing guest. This brother, a Midwest brother, fellow Midwest brother. And in this space, I want to say, beyond just the Midwest brother, just a compassionate, loving, inspiring, committed brother to helping others. Dr. Joe Johnson, welcome to the space. Let me give you a little applause here. Give it up to Dr. Joe Johnson. And you know the topic, right? The topic, Dr. Joe, is finding a therapist. What you got for us today, sir?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is, man, thank you for having me on the platform. I love what you're doing, and we need more and more of us to talk about this thing called healing, right? This thing called wellness, this thing called soul work, right? And, you know, the first thing that I think about when you say finding a therapist is I think about how often, you know, especially people within our communities, Black and brown communities, where there was a long time where we did not seek any type of professional service. Our services for trying to do help was going to church, praying about it, talking to grandma, right? And it's important now that not only you pray, you meditate, but you actually go do the work. That means you have to find a therapist. So the first thing I would say is it is important. I'm gonna say that again. It is important for you to work with a professional, because your grandmama is not your therapist. Your best friend is not your therapist. Your pastor is not your therapist. You need to go to a professional therapist so you can get the help that you need. So I'm gonna start right there.
I love that, Dr. Joe. And you're so right, right? I guess it's saying that and that, inspiring push, that knowing that, yeah, family can console and support, right? But then there's levels of pain and maybe trauma or whatever you want to place it that is beyond the grasp of some of those family members, right? In saying that, there's a level of reluctancy. I had it as a young person with therapy, right? And it took me a minute to really just like accept it. I guess, what are your thoughts with that when someone says, "Well, my grandma is like right there. They in my household," right? They're immediate, and they're safe, and they love me, and I know they love me unconditionally. I guess, what do you say to the folks who say that?
I say I understand, right? Because my grandmother was all that for me. And I think we get to a point where when you're understanding that there's, like you said earlier, there's levels to this thing called healing, right? There's levels to this thing called therapy. And what we have to understand is you have people who are, let me give you a great example, right? If you broke your leg and you knew somebody broke their leg before that lived with you, you're not going to go to them and be like, hey, help me do what I need to do to break my leg. First, you need to go find yourself a professional who can do whatever they need to do, put that cast on there, break it back in place, whatever they need to do. So you need a professional, right? And once again, I want you to hear me clearly. This does not mean you do not have dialogue with some of those individuals that you hold so close and so dear to your heart, right? But you have to understand there's a difference between having a mentor or having counsel, matter of fact, having wise counsel or having people that you know love you versus having a professional that can walk you through whatever you need to get through in terms of the healing space. So I need you to remember that there's a big difference.
Yeah. Yes, I agree completely with that one. And thank you for sharing that, Dr. Joe. I guess, my question for you in saying that, I guess, what got you past grandma, right? What was it? What was the step that really influenced you to say, okay, grandma's great, but I need more of this. I need to head this direction. I guess, what inspired you or motivated you to seek therapy, right?
Yeah, yeah. You know what? It's funny because I don't get asked that question often, but what happened for me was I went from, so let me just share this. I played ball my whole life, football and basketball. And my senior year in college, I had NFL teams looking at me. I didn't go to a big school, but I went to a Division II school, but I was up for the Division II Heisman, all of that, right? And so my identity from a young child was nothing but Joe Johnson, the athlete. That's it, Joe Johnson, the athlete, right? And what happened was I worked out for those teams and I was excited. I was like, ooh, these teams, yeah, I'm about to get this money. I was ready. And then afterwards, I waited and waited and waited, and I never got a phone call from an NFL team. Now, you have to understand when your identity is caught up in whatever your identity is caught up in, and for me, it was sports, being a football player, and you don't get that call to go to that next level, you begin to go a little crazy because all you know, all you focused on is you as the football player. And it wasn't until I started working, right? I ended up working at Enterprise Rent a Car. I did get an opportunity to play some arena ball, but I didn't like arena ball. So I was working at Enterprise Rent a Car. And then I met this black professor, right? Dr. Lonnie Duncan. And he came in and he was asking me, hey, what you want to do? What do you like? And I ended up getting connected to another black professor, right? This was Dr. Joseph Morris. Went in, I spoke with him, and they let me into graduate school on a probationary status because my grades were not that good. And the only reason I found out the power of therapy and counseling and the profession is because I actually started doing it and I started to see the fruit from that labor.
Love that, man. Yeah, and, it makes me reflect on a few things just because I know you, I know you as a friend as well, and I never heard this story. You never told me this before, right? And this is the great thing about bringing different folks to a platform and having these open conversations. And I think, yeah, I think there's this influence that sometimes you don't know is going to bring you to a different space in life, right? And
Yeah.
they, the front end influence of that person, whether they're inspiring or, you admire them for their strength or whatever, but that person is actually bringing you somewhere else to a space, right, of clarity or of comfort or vulnerability in a space where you're ready to actually take on therapy. So it sounds like you had that influence to kind of make you realize it because you also were doing the work, you were around it, right?
Yeah.
I guess for someone, and I'm speaking specifically, and let's be specific, right? Black and brown men.
Hmm.
For our black and brown men who are reluctant,
Hmm.
who beyond reluctant, that they avoid,
Yeah.
who hold it more within. The reason why I created Who's Helping You Heal is so folks won't suffer in silence, because I feel a lot of our brothers do, brothers and sisters. So in saying that, for those reluctant brothers and sisters, are folks who still need that help,
Hmm.
how do we tactfully, right? Because I know it has to be in a tactful space, but it has to be sincere and real. How do we introduce it to those folks? How do we get them there to believe in it the way you and I believe in it, right? Because as I shared, I was a non-believer.
Hmm.
When you
Yep.
told me therapy, I was like, please,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
not me. No, And I hear that from others, right? And now I'm on the other end of that. We're like, look, I know you feel that way, but what about this person? If they can help you, what does that feel for you, right? Like giving them the opposite of that. So how do we help the reluctant ones, the ones who avoid it, or the ones who might be not in a space that they don't feel ready per se?
Yeah. Let me say this. Let me say this. I'm sorry, I just dropped. I almost lost you. I just dropped my cord. My laptop was gonna fall, but it was gonna shut down. But anyways, I'll say this. Everybody is recovering from their childhood. Everybody. And so many people they've been through, I mean, some of the worst of the worst. Some people have been molested, right? Some people, their parents got divorced. Some people don't know their biological parents. Some people, they just been through it. And one of the worst phrases that most of us use, that so many of us use, especially black and brown folks, right? We like to say something like, oh, I'll figure it out. And what we have to understand is when we say, oh, I'll figure it out, what that means is I am going to do this alone. And the reality of the world that we live in, you can't do nothing alone, nothing alone. And especially when it comes to this healing piece, right? It's very, very important for us to help other individuals begin to trust someone with their process that we can actually grow in, right? I'll tell you this, and I'm gonna answer your question very specifically. One of the first times, well, my brother and sister are both in the entertainment industry, right? Loving hip hop. My brother's R&B artist, my sister just all kind of stuff. And my family and I, we went on Oprah's network in Y'all Fix My Life, right? And what I realized during that time when I was shooting that show, because there's a lot of real work that happens that people don't see. They get to see the TV version, but there's a lot of real work that happens. But what I realized when I was shooting that show was that was one of the first times that I committed and submitted myself to somebody else's process that can help me heal. Right. And part of the reason it took so long for me to do that is because we grow up with a hard time trusting people. Part of what we go through is listen, what happens in this house stays in the house. Don't you go sharing no business about what happens in this house, right? Or you might hear this is an adult conversation. You kids, you stay out of this. Let me tell you something. Right now is the time where we have to disrupt. We have to disrupt all of those things that we believe coming from our childhood, right? Because it's now time to talk about young people, talk to them about what's actually going on when you become an adult, right? Do it developmentally so they understand, but talk to them. Don't keep them out of the stuff that's happening. Why? Because now they're going to get older and not know what happens to adults. So they need to know when they're young so they can be prepared and getting ready for it. But I'm saying that to say we have to allow them build relationships with people so that they trust us. And now they trust our opinion to send them somewhere that can actually help them. So when we have somebody that's been an amazing therapist, they've done amazing work with us, we say, hey, listen, I work with this individual. And when they trust us, now they're more willing to go through the process because they trust us. We went through it, and they're going to take us for our word.
You said something there that resonated. You said a lot of great stuff, Dr. Joe, on that one. You were giving people some gems. I say that all the time. When I start saying the gems word, they drop in some gems on you. And you said something that resonate, and I call it like almost a container mentality where, when you grow up, and you're so right, households will be like, hey, what happens? We don't go outside telling our business. You don't go outside. If that teacher tells you this, right, you don't tell them what's going on in this house, right? And you that gets so instilled and embedded in your just kind of fiber, like your human fiber, that you just almost commit yourself to it without, like, you're oblivious to your commitment to it.
Yep.
Right. And I love how you said that, it's getting out of that container, being able to, so it's an ending of a cycle, right? Because that's what it was for me. My mom was very, in a form of way, she did share that, like, you don't tell people our business type of stuff. And so I did grow up in that way. And it took me a minute to get out of that container. And I felt like it was an ending of cycle. So I love what you shared in that one, and I know that you obviously, beyond all the amazing work you do, you're also an author. Mm-hmm. And you wrote a book specifically around this topic.
Yeah.
Let's dive a little into that, Dr. Joe. Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Why you wrote it? Why it resonated for you to bring it to the masses, right? Because it obviously resonated to you to bring to the masses, and I would love to just share that with our people on this platform.
What I would see so often and what I would hear so often is people that look like you and I say things like, well, I know I need some help, but I don't know how to find it. I don't know how to. And I said, because I kept hearing that over and over again. And for me, the way that my mind works is problem, okay, solution. That's it. Plain and simple, right? What's the problem? What's the solution? So what did I do? I wrote a book, How to Find a Therapist. Very simple, to the point, right? It walks you from looking for a therapist all the way until your first session, right? Now, mind you, there are some other opportunities that's been created over the past several years where you don't necessarily have to go to a physical office to see a therapist. So there's some online possibilities, but there's also, what a lot of people don't know, there's free therapy in a lot of our communities. Right. There's also sometimes what people do is they'll go and say, you know what, I want a therapist. I'm going to go try a therapist. They try a therapist and the therapist is so whack, so terrible. They say, well, I tried it. I'm done. Let me tell you something. I've had that experience, too, where I went, found a therapist, and I knew that first day. I said, oh, nope, absolutely not. This isn't the therapist for me. Guess what? You can go and seek. You can say, hey, I want a Black woman with a Christian background, you can really seek that out. Sometimes you can't find exactly what you want, but you can find something pretty close. And the thing is, if someone doesn't connect with you the way that you desire as your therapist, right? Don't just say forget therapy. Now you say, okay, it's time for me to find somebody else. And the best way you can do that is to find people that's taken therapy and see if they can guide you in the right direction. But the other part is, do your research, go online, call people. Talk to people, have those initial conversations and say, hey, what's your mindset on therapy? Like, what have you been through, right? Are you just a person that you went to school and now you want to be therapy? Or have you actually had life experiences? So you can go and seek exactly what it is that you want. And in my book, How to Find a Therapist, I walk you through all of these steps all the way until your first session. There we go.
Well, big ups to you. I think the fact that resonated in you to say you heard it enough from people, right? You must have, like, those conversations must have resonated with you if they were brought to you, like, hearing that constant, advertisement, self-advertisement, like, I don't know what to do. It costs too much. The person ain't gonna relate to me, right? So big ups to you for, like, taking all of that and saying, I want to fix that. And that is you. Dr. Joe is a problem fixer, right? You're going to bring solutions to the table.
Absolutely.
So and that's what I love about you, sir. And that's big ups to you. I guess the question in that, and as you were talking, I thought about this in more of your opinion, I guess how important is it for that first therapist to work out for someone who's new to it, right? Is how vital is it for that to work out, or is there a little bit of longevity and maybe stamina to it?
Yeah, yeah. So, there's a little accountability on both sides, right? Because if you don't know a whole lot about what you can do in terms of looking for a therapist, you may have an experience that's not so great your first time with a therapist, and they just throw you all the way off. But if you understand the game, you can say, you know what? That therapist just wasn't for me, right? And so there's accountability on both sides. So what's really important is for people to understand what they can and cannot do in regards to finding a therapist. And I think some people, they run away, or they want to say, you know what, this is my excuse not to do therapy. And my thing is, if you really want to do the work, if you really want to, as I say, level up and evolve in the direction that you're supposed to, you're going to have a therapist. And so that first initial experience, it could make or break. But I think on the flip side, if the person that's looking for a therapist understands the game, that first experience with a therapist may not be as vital as someone who doesn't understand the game.
For sure. I totally agree with you on that one, Dr. Joe, because I know my first experience, I believe that my therapist knew that I was reluctant.
Uh-huh.
I believe he felt that energy for me. I didn't even have to say it. I think he felt it for me.
Yeah. You were
And
sitting, you were
I want,
sitting in there like this.
I might have had the arms folded a little bit, had that West Side Chicago mug on my
Yeah.
face, but I remember him really. I remember walking away from the session saying that was actually easy, and I believe it's because he actually took it a little. He met me where I was at. Right, he was
Yeah.
like, "All right, Adam Perez is here." I know he's reluctant to this. I feel that from him, and you're right. There's that accountability on both parts, and my therapist, he owned his accountability in that sense because he met me where I was at. He saw some of the apprehensions that I was holding in some of my talk, and he chipped away on it, right? And I'm thinking in other ways because he was really my first therapist, and it was important to me for my therapist to look like me and maybe understand where I come from. And he wasn't that at all. He was opposite of that. So there was a little bit of triggering as I came to my first appointment. But what I'm saying to what you were saying, to your point, as I came in there, I held my accountability as I showed up, even though my wife kind of grabbed me by my arm, like, take your ass in here. Um, and he held his part, and that
Yeah.
was to show up for me where I was at, and it was beautiful and it worked out, right? But let's say if he would have came in heavy-handed, or maybe like a little pushy, I think I wouldn't have came back to that therapist, right? I would have been like, no, this ain't working out. So I guess for the folks who might be in that space, we know the folks who are getting victories with it and are connecting to the therapist. Big ups to y'all. Great for y'all. Let's give you applause for that one. But for the folks, Dr. Joe, who are still struggling to find a therapist, and maybe they have specifics, as you mentioned, they want a black person, right, or a brown person, or someone who has a specific religion, right? How do we support those folks? What are, I guess, coming to the tangible resources space, right, and providing some tangible resources for the listeners. What are the 1-2 punch on for the individuals who might be still struggling to find that therapist or connection to a therapist, or maybe they tried 3 already and they're like, Dr. Joe, I'm all tried out. I ain't got no more trying me. What about
Yeah.
those folks? What are the 1-2 punch for those individuals?
Yeah, so I'm gonna give you two different things that I believe could work for you. The first thing is, if there's anybody in your circle or in your vicinity that you're connected to or can be connected to, right? Reach out to them, especially if you know they've had therapy and it seems like they've been successful with finding a therapist. Reach out to them and get some feedback from them, right? About different therapists, or about, hey, maybe sometimes you got to shift your perspective, right, on therapists, right, and therapy. And so that's the first thing I would do, because sometimes we don't take advantage of the people that are close to us, people that we can reach, right, even if we don't know them specifically, but maybe we know somebody that knows them and can connect us, right? Because when you get connected to somebody through somebody you trust, you're more open to listen and hear what they have to say. So that's the first thing I'll do. I'll say. The second thing is, let me tell you something, the power of technology. The power of technology, right? And what I mean by that is you can go on Facebook, you can go on Instagram, you can go on LinkedIn, you can go on so many different platforms and go to Black therapists in Michigan, Black therapists in Florida, right? Christian therapists here, right? And usually there's a group, right? And if you can't find your specific group, you can tap into one of these groups and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Can you direct me? And usually 99% of the time, they will direct you in the right place so that you can find what you're looking for. So take advantage of technology, right? And then you also have some of these new mental health platforms that provide therapy over the internet, right? So you can even look into that. But I think what's most important is because there's something about a human touch first for you to get that experience with therapists, right? It's something about that human touch and that being in the physical presence of somebody that really does something to you when you have an amazing therapist. So those are two things. Look at the people in your circle or in your vicinity that's had an amazing therapist, but also take advantage of technology. You can go find groups on Instagram, Facebook, and if it's not the exact group that you're looking for, 9.5 times out of 10, those individuals in those groups will point you into the right directions of other therapists that will really help you out.
Joe, I love that 1-2 punch because you're so right. I think for me, because it worked for me, and I was able, my first therapist, bam, worked out, right? I became more of an advocate, right? So you're so on the connection of your circle, and maybe there's someone in your circle who has an amazing therapist because they're already seeing them and doing work with them, how that can be such a great word of mouth and recommendation, right? Because a lot of what we do in our communities is word of mouth. Right? If it's a good eating spot or whatever else, why can't we treat therapy in that way? Like, hey, I got this great therapist, hook you up. Like, might be a great fit. But I think, in the other part of what you said, the platforms, there's so many platforms, so many therapists. I have a few therapists I put on this platform who are always willing to help and support people as well. So those 1-2 punch, amazing, brother. Thank you, Dr. Joe. Another applause for Dr. Joe for coming through on the Mental Health Minute and dropping some gems. I'm going to put all the links and descriptions, book descriptions, all in our description box here. Please remember to like and subscribe. I'm going to keep bringing this goodness every Wednesday, and we're definitely going to bring Dr. Joe back again. He is going to come back again to this platform. So, Dr. Joe, any last words before we end this Mental Health Minute, sir?
Yeah, let me just say, for a person that's been through a lot, for a person that's done the work, for a person that I do the work with other people, for the person that I do the work for myself, right? I go to a therapist, I have a healing coach, right? I do all of this work. But I think what's most important is you got to understand two things, right? In life, you evolve or you evaporate. I'm Dr. Joe Johnson. Thank y'all so much.
You heard it from Dr. Joe. This is Mental Health Minute. We're back every Wednesday. Once again, thank you, Dr. Joe. Take care of yourselves because you are the star player. And you know what my last question is? Who's helping you heal? Peace.